Welcome to our first series on the Speak Your Mind with Father Joe series. Thank you for being here with me. Today I have Dr. Kathleen Jackson, one of our members of our parish, and I've known her now a little over a year. Came to know her husband, herself about a year and a half ago. Thoroughly enjoyed Kathleen and the wonderful journey that we have had together. And she moved here from Virginia to Springfield as the dean of the Cox College here in Springfield. And now she's retired and she's our Sunday school superintendent. And she also is our Altar Guild person, the leader of the Altar Guild ministries, and lots of ministries that she is entering into. And I'm very excited for Kathleen being here with us. So I would like to turn the camera to Kathleen, and then we'll get to hear her story, her journey, and it is a great joy to have Dr. Kathleen here with us. Kathleen, thank you. Thank you for being here with me today and to talk and to share your journey, spiritual journey. And also I'm grateful that you have taken the ministries of the church very seriously with your history as an Episcopalian. You know, this journey has been wonderful for however many years you have been in the Episcopal Church. Give me some idea of the journey that you have taken, your childhood, where you grew up, your parents, your family, your faith journey. What makes you happy to do what you do here at St. James in this community, and what your hopes are?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I was born in Tullahoma, Tennessee, and we moved to Nashville when I was 2. My father was a physician at Vanderbilt. My mother was the Episcopalian, and my father came from the Presbyterian church, and he was actually disowned by an aunt for marrying an Episcopalian. But we were raised in the Episcopal church, and we did go to Sunday church every Sunday and Sunday school, often followed by Krispy Kreme donuts or sometimes going on rounds with my father in the hospital. This was before the days of HIPAA and privacy and that sort of thing. But he would take, I remember going with him several times too.
So you had a Krispy Kreme at the time?
Yes, we had Krispy Kreme.
I thought a Krispy Kreme is something very new.
No. I think my mother, after having 4 kids, needed any kind of bribery she could get her hands on to keep us good in church. But you know, and I did the junior choir, which I really loved, and which we had Peter Fife, who actually ended up being at the National Cathedral at one point, who as our organist. So he was an excellent musician, and my father played piano and liked to turn the pages for him. He just really enjoyed that. So we were very involved in our Episcopal church, but as a child, of course, I found it incredibly dull and boring. You know, all the pomp and circumstance and ceremony, I was just like, when can we get out of church? When will that sermon be over? You know, that sort of thing. So those are my childhood memories of the church as far as when I was a young child.
So when were you confirmed? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was confirmed like right on time at 12 or 13. Yeah, something in there. Obviously baptized in the church and then confirmed. So I went through the whole process, and it was a big deal because that was the first time you got to taste wine. Was when you were 12 years old. And my father, he was funny because on Sundays he would allow us, after we were confirmed, to have a little bit of sherry on Sunday afternoons. So that was a big deal. You know, this was before the age of like, oh my gosh, children having alcohol. But I think it kind of, they were of the school of the era of the cocktail hour. And I remember cocktail parties in Nashville and people smoking and drinking and, you know, all of that stuff. And so I think any allure of alcohol was not it just wasn't in the cards for us. We were good kids. We really were. We didn't cause any trouble or go drinking because it was not a mystery to us. It was just part of
That's right. Something that you grew up with even in church.
Yeah, even in church. We drank real wine.
Real wine.
Yeah.
And And so when did you go to school, the nursing, that you went into nursing?
Yes.
And you enjoyed that job. So, but what made you, believe that you're called in nursing? And because it's been long-term
Yes.
journey.
Yes, I've been a nurse for over 39 years now.
Wow.
So when I grew up, I really, I was a very, very lonely child.
Uh-huh.
I felt like an odd duck in almost every environment I was in. So that's kind of a long story short, but
expand a little more if you can. Why do you say that you were a lone duck? Meaning what?
I just never felt like I quite fit in.
Okay.
In my family, it was with my siblings.
Uh-huh.
I felt like they thought I was kind of weird. I think that my school, I felt at odds most of the time growing up. And then we moved around a lot. We moved to Charlottesville, and then we moved to Little Rock when I was in high school. And Little Rock was very much if you weren't born there in Arkansas, we were coming from Virginia at that time. And so I was like this total outcast in high school. But anyway, I came to love as a child animals. Mm-hmm. And I really felt closer to animals than people. Mm-hmm. I really, because they just give back to you. There's this unconditional love. They don't care how weird you are. So I wanted to be a veterinarian. That's what I'm trying to get to. So my dream from a little girlhood, a lot of people I know who are nurses wanted to be a nurse since they were a little girl. Mm-hmm. I did not. I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Veterinarian, okay. Uh-huh.
But I was absolutely fascinated by medicine. I was fascinated by rounds with my father. I was fascinated. I would research. I would read the paper from a young age. And I read about Dr. DeBakey and the first heart transplant in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I did clippings I had a notebook that I put clippings in about that because I was so fascinated with all things medical, biological, those sorts of things. So I wanted to be a veterinarian. Mm-hmm. So somewhere along the road, my parents moved to Texas. And and I was in college at the time, but my best shot at getting into veterinarian school would be in the state where they paid taxes. Okay. So I transferred to Texas A&M, which had a veterinary school. And while I was there, this little odd duck, lonely girl discovered boys and dating. Because at Texas A&M, there are 9 males to every 1 female.
Oh, gee.
So if you even just smiled, you could get a date.
That's right.
And the tradition was you go to the football games, and every time the Aggies scored, you got kissed. So that was right up my alley. I loved it. So I'm in chordate anatomy, organic chemistry, these big, heavy subjects to get into vet school. And all of a sudden, I found dating. And so my focus was not as academic as maybe it could have been. I nearly failed physics. I had to really work on that one. So my father comes along and talks to me at one point. He says, Kathleen, why don't you go into nursing? Okay. You can be a nurse practitioner and practice like a doctor, but you don't have to create your own practice, go into business, do all those things. And I'm in the back I did not say this to my father, but I said, and I don't have to give up a social life to get there. Right. Okay. So I transferred into pre-nursing, which seemed incredibly easy after pre-med. Right. Pre-med, I had been pre-med, and that was tough. And pre-nursing was easy, and I thought, wow, I've let myself down. I'm not challenging myself. And then I got into nursing school, and I went, yeah, this is very challenging. So I ended up in Galveston because Texas A&M had a relationship with UTMB, University of Texas Medical Branch, and so that's where I ended up in nursing school. And that's how my father, it was actually more of a practical decision than a calling at first. But I found my feet in nursing, and I fell in love. I remember nursing school's tough, and if you talk to any nursing student, they're going to tell you how much they hate it while they're in it. because it's extremely hard. And I don't know why it has to be that way, but I've talked to enough modern nursing students to know they hated it too.
Right. I think when you think of it though, because you're dealing with the human trauma every day, and so when you're not trained and you're going through the training, it is tough because you have to adapt and understand and learn how to deal with the human trauma on a regular basis, and so it is not an easy thing.
Right.
Yeah, so I can understand why it will be hard, but I'm glad that you found a way through it all to the journey that you were on, though.
What I realized was I loved that, just what the human to human interaction, the patients, I loved. The other pieces, the politics, the psych nurse teacher who said something to me that was not kind. Those things that I didn't like, I hate nursing school, but I love nursing. I could see beyond the trauma of school and trying to learn it to what it really was. That human to human interaction. And I think I fell in love with people at that point. I really began to understand that people were important.
I think that's the key. I think any job for that reason, I believe, to really understand people matter. All the the customers are always right principle. Right. I don't know if I want to go that route, but even to think people matter,
Yes.
I think when any job for that reason, when we can actually see that.
Yes.
It's not about philosophy, it's not about law, it's not about just ideology. At the end of the day, it is only practical when it becomes human.
Right.
And I think that's what you found.
I did.
Yeah.
And they taught us, I'll tell one story from nursing school, if that's okay.
Yeah.
In my senior practicum, I was in an intensive care unit. And I had an elderly lady patient who was actively dying. She was in her final minutes, hours, whatever, when I came on shift. And we had been taught in nursing school that hearing is the last thing to go, that you want to be very careful what you say around a patient who does not seem to be responding, because they may in fact be able to hear you.
Yeah.
And so we were in the room and we were talking about her, and her nurse said, well, we were kind of doing rounds, I guess, and she was talking about the patient. She said, well, she's dying and by noon she'll be dead.
Oh my.
And she says this in front of the patient. And I was horrified because I thought, how would I feel if I'm lying in a bed in my final moments and somebody said, well, Kathleen, your clock's running out at 10 o'clock. That's it, you're done. I thought, how horrific if that poor woman, and should we not err on the side of she could hear that and not say that in her, that may have been true. But it's like, let's go outside of the room to discuss that. And furthermore, you can't know the exact hour of someone's death. That's silly. So that experience just really stuck with me, because one of the things they taught us was we are the patient advocate. And I've always taken that extremely seriously, that we are there for that patient. And I would never do that. And I don't know that upset her, or she heard it, or if she was like, oh, good. But you just, you learn things in school, and then you see people disregarding things that I had the sense of that they should be valued and lifelong lessons.
Yeah.
But I just remember just the agony of and that's the first time I saw somebody after she had died, and I understood what death looked like.
Yeah. Let me ask you, one of the things that I always wondered, your nursing background, and so there is a place where you practiced what you felt you were called to in nursing, in the hospital and in the clinical setting, plus also in the school system, teaching.
Yes.
That, you were involved in both of that.
Absolutely.
When you look into that, teaching and nursing, when you compare the two, and now that you're retired, now you are involved in church ministry stuff,
right.
How do you look at all these different areas that you worked or ministered to spiritually? How beneficial were they for you? Or did you see any kind of spiritual connection in the job that you did?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because it's about that one-on-one connection with people. And one of the things as I look back, as you know, I'm attempting to write some memoirs.
Mm-hmm.
As I look back over 39 years, mm-hmm. I've realized it didn't matter if I was a newborn intensive care nurse, a public health nurse, a nursing instructor, a dean.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what role,
mm-hmm.
the role was not important.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting to me and what was I believe God is looking at is how did I treat the mother in front of me
mm-hmm.
who they called me up to the pediatric ward because they had labeled her a difficult mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I got that call of dealing with a difficult mother,
mm-hmm.
how did I treat her?
Yeah.
That's what was important.
Mm-hmm.
That was the spiritual moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into her and I just listened to her. And she knew
mm-hmm.
they were talking about her. And I helped her kind of process that because it's what I do with that one person that matters more. And it is very spiritual and it does inform my spirituality. When I come to church, my goal is that everybody
mm-hmm.
in this building, I'm going to love them. Mm-hmm. I'm going to hold them up as my brother and sister. Doesn't matter who they are or whether they're personally difficult for me or
mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone I'm going to treat in that everyone is acceptable. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I start.
Right.
And then move forward from there. And it's the same way with patients.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a pediatric nurse and you've got a baby who's been abused by the parents,
mm-hmm.
you learn pretty quickly you can't judge the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Because parent and child are
Connected, yeah.
And if you judge the parent, you will not help that baby.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, and it's not easy, and I can't tell you, it's like riding a bicycle. I can't tell you exactly how it's done, but you have to put that aside and deal with the situation in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the toughest situation in nursing I've ever faced.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that informs, that again, it's a spirituality thing. You have to see the deeper meaning, the mm-hmm. deeper connections
mm-hmm.
Between things.
Yeah. One thing I wondered, working in Episcopalians, we are not many in the world.
Yes.
It's a small community of people, but very different from most religious communities that we
Absolutely.
Find. And you have been a lifelong Episcopalian. You have seen changes in the Episcopal Church from one end to the other.
Oh, yeah.
And what do you think about all these changes? And how do we fit into the community? Do we really fit into it? Or do you think it is necessary for us to fit in? Is there something meaningful and beautiful about us being who we are, with all the theological spectrum that we have, one end to the other? How do you deal with people who do not understand us, or where do you go with that?
I do think there's something beautiful and unique about the Episcopal Church that I would hate to see lost.
Mm-hmm.
Would I love it if more people became Episcopalians? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's, if I were in your position, mm-hmm. I'm not sure that's what I would think was the most important. I love the fact that we are called the thinking person's church. And there's a danger in that because it can lead me to being prideful about that. And I don't want to be prideful about that. But at the same time, we don't toss aside our reasoning, our belief. We can believe in science and faith, because as a nurse, I am a scientist and an artist at the same time. I've always believed that. And so Christianity and nursing are very entwined to me. They're the same in a lot of respects because there's service. And so, yeah, I think the church is wonderful. I remember my brother-in-law is an Episcopal priest. And when he and Susan, my sister, got together at Sewanee, he didn't believe that women should be in the priesthood and all this other stuff, you know. And now he's come so far the other way. So, yes, there's been wonderful... I love the progressive nature of the church, that the church is trying... The Episcopal Church, I think, is trying very hard to deal with the world as it is now and be Christ-like in this
the present moment
world. And with this, with the people who exist now. You know, we don't cling to theology because that's the way it's always been, and we are not biblical literalists for the most part. I mean, there's some people who probably are more literal than I am, but we're not bound. We're not tied up in our own theology. I guess, you know.
Does that in any way? You know, there are people who think differently than you in the church. Spiritually, theologically, politically. You know, you see people from all walks of life. How does that affect your spirituality, your personal spiritual journey in the Episcopal Church? Is that in any way, you know, bothersome? Are you anxious that some people don't believe the same thing that you believe? Can you be part of the same community even though you don't believe the same?
I think it used to bother me more than it does now today. I come to... I think that's the challenge that God's put in front of me. Is to see that beauty in the other person, to try to understand their point of view. It's very difficult in these polarized times. Because you can't even, it's considered impolite to even have the conversation. Which is sad. But it's getting down to underneath that, to saying, I keep going back to something I see a lot right now about you're never going to meet somebody who's not the face of God. You know, and that's what... Can I go back to something in my... Because this is really relevant. When I was in high school, again, I was very lonely. I was not an Arkansan. It was tough. So I got invited to join a Bible club, you know, and it was very fundamentalist. And I had one best friend, and she and I joined this Bible club, and we were very fundamentalist. And then I went away to college, and it was in Ohio. And I went to this little college in Ohio, and all of a sudden, I was seeing the face of God in people who would have told me they didn't believe in God at all. Because those people, despite my fundamentalism, despite I was still carrying a Bible around with me like I did through high school. I was still, you know, kind of on that edge. But they loved me anyway. All of a sudden, I had friends, I had dates, I had, you know, it was like I became a human being again. And when they embraced me as this fundamentalist, I suddenly realized that it was like scales fell from my eyes, and I went, I see God in these people who are doing things that I've been told and taught were wrong.
So you came to a place you don't judge them anymore.
I didn't.
Yeah.
And I was like appalled that I ever had, because it was like they were not judging me.
Right.
And they were probably behind my back rolling their eyes at some of the things I said and did, because I was still defending the faith, and they probably were like, oh, God, Jackson, Meryl, stop that,
Yeah.
I was Meryl then.
Yeah.
But that taught me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It taught me a lot to say, and so I keep coming back to thinking about that these days, about how you're never going to meet anybody who isn't reflecting the face of God to you. And so I try to keep that in mind. I try to understand where people are coming from and what maybe is driving what they believe, and the danger is it can get into a kind of a condescension. So you have to watch for that.
That's right.
But, I would love to be able to have those conversations with people who believe radically differently than I do. If I could do that without generating upset feelings or hurt.
Correct.
And,
and it does happen, though. That's the thing. When we speak our mind, when we open up, it does cause anxiety in people.
Yeah.
Because none of us can actually see where the other person is coming from. Right. Their experience, their history, their past, all those things, we don't know that.
Right.
We are oblivious to their journey.
Right.
And so when we bring up something, or when they bring up something, we only have the point of reference of what I have gone through or what you have gone through.
Right.
And then we come to the conclusions based on where we are.
Right.
And if anybody, maybe I'm being arrogant in saying this, but sometimes when people say they know the truth and this is exactly how it is going to be, I always wonder, how in the world do they know that?
Right.
I was not born here. I didn't hear the language. I don't know where we are coming from. And this is how I was taught, which is diametrically opposed to what is being taught to the other person. So, I want to go back to something, when you said as a nurse and your spiritual journey and judgmentalism and all of that, at the end of the day, isn't that what we all need when we are struggling and suffering and going through pain? Someone to be kind and compassionate and be present to us.
Right.
Now, that's not what we receive most of the time.
Right.
Now, one thing I also will say, do you think God is going to judge us? That's one of the things we hear, some of the pastors and teachers will say, you do this, you do that, and God is going to judge you, you're going to damnation, you're going to hell. All kinds of pronouncements have been made. What do you think about that? Do you believe that's how God is going to act?
Yeah. No.
What makes you say so?
I can't reconcile a loving, accepting God with one who would send us to eternal damnation because I said a bad word out in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, I can't, and I didn't apologize for it. I just can't. It's funny because I was thinking about that on the way over. I can't believe in hell.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. And I've heard it said that Jesus was referring to a burning dung heap on the outside of Jerusalem, not, when he talked about hell. And so, obviously, I do not know.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe God accepts us as, I think he shakes his head a lot, but I think he accepts all of us as we are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that works.
Okay.
I don't know how that works.
So you're not worried about something that you don't know how God works, and you are quite comfortable, let God figure it out.
I am, actually.
Okay.
I do believe God loves me.
Yes.
And I cling to that, and I believe that he would not do anything to hurt me. Now, does that relieve me from responsibility for treating people well? Mm-hmm. No, actually it does not. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that's a little difficult to reconcile. But I don't think he wants me to be good to Anne or to Vicky so that I can pave my way. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's, my call to be good to them is not to keep myself out of hell. Does that make sense?
Right.
You know, it's not to save myself.
Right. You're doing it because they deserve it.
Yes.
They need to be loved. They deserve your love and care, not because you're afraid whether you're going to heaven or hell.
Correct. And they deserve it as much as I do, for sure.
Right.
So if I deserve it, don't they deserve it?
Yeah.
And that's why I love what we're doing with Bishop Curry and the Way of Love. I think that's all on the right track. And again, if you go back to nursing, that is nursing. You cannot judge. You don't get to pick your patient. You don't get to, decide this patient is worthy of my care, that patient is not. Because he murdered 5 people, I'm not going to help him. You don't get to do that. And so I guess that's why I feel like nursing and spirituality are very, very married in my mind. I know there are other nurses who don't marry that up as much, but to me, it's deeply entwined.
Yeah, actually, when you think of that, the call that you have as a nurse, caring for the people who are suffering, and when you think of a minister caring for people who are suffering in a different way,
sure,
or who needs the spiritual support, at the end of the day, a nurse and a doctor and a pastor and a financial administrator or a secretary or a janitor or every one of us we are all trying to actually help people alleviate their struggles and sufferings in daily life to make it easier.
Right. That's right. That's what a servant profession does.
Correct.
Yes.
And we are all supposed to be, starting with the president all the way down.
Sure.
We are supposed to be, any profession is meant to advance the cause of human well-being. It doesn't matter what in the world we do.
Sure.
At the end of the day, if it doesn't make something better for somebody else, it doesn't matter what the job it is. So we can take a computer analyst and a telephone maker and a factory worker in China and in Japan and in Ukraine. Every single human being, their job is to make life easier one way or another, doing whatever they are doing for somebody else.
I agree.
And in that process, that alone brings up enough and more struggles without anybody else adding on to that.
Right.
So at the end of the day, if I said spirituality at the end of the day is to walk with people, journey with people, no matter where they are.
Right.
What would you say about that? Is that, because what I'm saying is about the Bible and about the teachings of the church and about all the liturgical practices, all of those things I'm going to keep aside when I say that.
Right. Oh, I think that's absolutely correct. It's Bob reaching out to help somebody in the church who has a walker and carrying her books for her. Noticing little ways you can, and all of those things, and they may seem very small in the moment, but it's that being there for people, and I, have my moments of impatience or not wanting to do it, like anybody else.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is being there as part of the journey. And one of the best thing I ever learned in nursing, and again informed my spiritual life, is to listen. Really listen, and not just, and it's to really listen is to really hear, and that's hard work. It's not just sitting here with my ears open and Joe said liturgy, okay, fine. It's really hearing what you're saying. You're saying, I'm putting that aside. What is faith? Is it walking with? Is it supporting that person in the moment? And that's the best nurses know how to really listen.
Right. I'm going to ask you a personal question, not necessarily a personal question, something, as a pastor. So are you going to take anything that I say from the pulpit? I preach every Sunday and I teach some classes, and because I'm a pastor, I know best.
Yes, you do.
So are you going to buy into everything I say, or are you going to think for yourself?
Oh no, I think I'm going to think for myself.
Okay,
You know?
good.
But at the same time, a lot of what you say resonates on a different level.
Right. But I could very well be wrong.
Yeah, but it's not so much the intellectual point you're trying to make.
Right.
That I can wrestle with on an intellectual level.
Mm-hmm.
But what touches me in my spirit probably has something to do with my life or my connections or and that is not so much saying you're right or wrong as saying, how does that impact me?
Mm-hmm.
Does that,
Yes.
am I making sense?
Yeah.
So it's more like, why is that, like there was a day you preached and I came in here crying.
Mm-hmm.
And why?
Mm-hmm.
Why did that make me cry? It wasn't the words you said. It was something you meant that
Touched
got
you.
into my spirit and
Right.
connected somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even remember what it
Right,
was.
which is okay.
But
Right. It's something like, my friend once told me that when I go to a movie theater and if I'm able to cry, it's not a bad thing. Somehow the movie has affected my heart the way that I think I'm able to empathize
right.
with what is going on. Or sometimes when I am able to connect with people, I enter into those emotions myself.
Right.
So yeah, as long as as a pastor, I don't ever want to have the power to make you not to think.
Right.
See, I dislike that. I want you to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And because sometimes I am also going to say things from my perspective, which may be very different from yours.
Right.
At the end of the day, the spiritual journey is yours, not mine.
Right.
Your journey
Right.
is
I
yours.
gotcha.
If you are not able to reflect and respond to God, and you're only listening to what I'm talking about, and you don't have a responsibility for your journey, then it is no more personal.
Right.
And many Christians, I believe, that's what they do. They listen to someone else and they say and do and go after because they heard somebody with authority, someone who's in leadership who will tell them, this is what you're supposed to do, without even thinking for themselves.
Right.
That's what I hear sometimes. And it bothers me. It causes anxiety.
I'm sure it does, because I can relate to that again. As a nurse, you're often seen as an expert, and that people will say, well, if she said that, and I patients like that always made me so nervous, because it's like, wait a minute, this is, and I dealt mostly in pediatrics, so it's like, this is your baby, this is your child, his illness or her illness. I'm telling you my best advice, but I'm not, that doesn't mean I'm right.
Right.
Because we never know which way this is going to go.
Right.
So it makes me nervous when people say, oh, well, without, so I understand what you're saying, but I consider myself a critical thinker. I don't know that I accept anything anybody says without some thought.
And you're okay, and you feel the church is comfortable with the fact that you are a critical thinker.
Yes, that's what I love about it. I get to be that. There's not a lot of dogma. I have a difficult time imagining you saying something that I would just say, wait a minute, because you'd have to be pretty dogmatic to do that. You'd have to say, this is Kathleen, the only right way for you to believe is to spend 20 minutes in prayer 3 times a day. If you don't do that,
you're going
sorry,
to hell. Yes.
You're done. You're not, and I haven't heard a lot of Episcopal priests who would do that.
Right.
In all of my travels and lifetimes through Episcopal priests.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
I want to have more conversation for the next session.
Sure.
The piece that I want to hear now, this is basically your journey, your personal life, And of course, we haven't heard about your husband, Bob, and how that journey and your fur babies at home.
Yes.
Hear about the fur babies as well. And then I want to hear about your ministry, the current ministry of being an altar girl mistress and also Sunday school. And I have a couple of questions for the Sunday school, but we will continue with that at a later session.
Sure.
But I'm grateful that you joined me today.
Me too.
Talked about, and I want to share this with the people. I think, everyone needs to hear the journey that we are simple, normal human beings going throughout life, and not to be afraid of what it is that we are doing, afraid of going to hell. Should not be the motivating factor to be doing the right thing in life.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think you look at, you may want to edit this out, but when we raise children, when they're very young, you have to teach them right from wrong. You have to say, no, don't touch a hot burner. And there's a huge consequence if they do touch the hot burner. So they learn not to so they don't get burned. But as they grow up, there should be an evolution where they behave well because they behave well, not because their dad's not going to punish them.
Right.
But because they want to be good.
Right.
They want to function well in society. They want to get along.
Yeah. I have 3 simple questions to ask to you. One, every day you pray, and if I ask you to say a prayer, for whom will that be?
Sometimes it's for the person I have most trouble getting along with.
Okay. And the second question is, if you have to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to God for.
Right now, I am grateful to God for Bob.
Okay. And do you get anxious about your children?
Yes, but not as much.
Right.
It's different when they're grown.
Do you pray for them?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And how important it is for you to have your fur babies?
Very. There's one particular cat I'm very, very close to because we went through her labor together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she trusted me with that.
Yeah.
I know that's what my inner veterinarian has to get fed somehow.
Right.
Sometimes I wish I had become a veterinarian, but
for those people who are going to watch this on the web, what would you like to tell them?
I'd like to say that I love you and that God loves you, and I hope this helps you in some way or resonates with you in some way.
Thank you. I want to thank Kathleen for joining me today and having this conversation with me on her own journey, spiritual journey that she's on, and for being an Episcopalian lifelong and serving in many different roles in the church, singing in the choir, serving at the altar, and teaching Sunday school classes, and serving anytime she has an opportunity to do that. She is here. So I'm grateful for her ministry. Please come and join me next time for the second part of this journey that she's on, and when we enter into some theological conversation on the things that are going on in the church, and for us all to enter into and understand and talk about. I think it is okay to talk about the things that we understand and we don't understand. I think the Lord is not going to send us to hell because we disagreed on things. So this is a forum for us to talk about that. Thank you again.